Cool. So what we'll do is, for those of you who are not on camera, why don't we turn our cameras off? Thomas, I'll get you on the spotlight so everyone can see you.
Okay.
And we will spotlight for everybody, and I'll turn my camera off. Okay,
Here
Thomas,
I
why don't
am.
you jump right in and
Hi,
start?
everybody. Okay, so I've got a project open on my end with that scene that I put together just with the examples that I'm going to be walking through. And to get started, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, host disabled participant screen sharing.
It's on
last
now. It's on for you right now. You just made you a co-host, so now you will be able to
awesome.
share. Yeah.
Okay, so just going to share my screen and everybody can see Discord. So I'm going to open up the project and
Perfect.
here we are. So as you can see, it's a relatively simple environment. I've got some gizmos, show the grid, things like that. I can disable my lighting. And for the most part, I have like different types of interactivity broken off into different sections, one on this side, one on that side. And I'm just gonna run through a couple examples of some common interactivity functions people try to put into their scenes. And hopefully I'll cover the majority of the questions you have, and feel free to ask Rachel or the rest of the team about other use cases that you might wanna see. So without further ado, I'm going to start over at this little guy here. And this particular example, I'm going to be talking about the collider element, which is basically where you can take a box or some kind of volume if you want something in your scene to interact when like a hand enters it, or if you throw an object of some kind and you want it to trigger an event or something like that. This is the kind of element you'd probably use. And it's relatively simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cube here, and what I want to do is add a box collider to it, like so. And I don't need to make it a trigger to work with the collider element. It actually works pretty well if you leave it as a non-trigger. And then what I want to do is I want to add a collider element script, which comes with the Flipside Creator Tools. Just going to add that there. Just going to dock my chat window so I can see a little bit more. And as you can see, there's a variety of different setups or variety of different pieces of information, everything from like different tags you can use to target specific things like hands, index finger, or even custom tag or specific objects you want to do things when it enters your collider. For now, I'm going to leave that at hands. And what I want to do is I want to change the color of this capsule here so that when your hands are inside of it, it has a different material. So I'm going to take the collider visual. That's this object here. I can actually move that around a little. Go back to the collider. And what I want to do is call the mesh renderer function and set that to material material. And as you can see, there's like a whole variety of different things we can do, or like call different things, like change the tag name, float radius, mesh render settings. But for the most part, like swapping a material is a really common thing that I'll be doing. So on enter is the specific function that I'm targeting. I want to swap to this blue material here. Sorry, drag the wrong thingy. Okay, so collider visual, renderer, and material, plug that in there. So now when my hand is inside that collider, it'll change the color of the object. And on exit, when I take my hand out, I want it to go back to the other material. So mesh renderer, material, and it's this matte orange like so. And that's essentially it. It works better to preview it inside of Flipside once you've exported your set, but if you simulate your scene, you can actually test out effects on colliders or toggles or things like that by firing the different events with these buttons down here while you're simulating. So for instance, I can go fire event, swaps to blue, fire on exit, swaps to orange. And once the scene's actually built, when I stick my hand inside of this red collider area, it'll swap the material on that. And you can wire up any amount of functionality in your scene. For instance, if I wanted to target this box here, let me see here. So collider visual, that's wall 20, collider, that's wall 21. There we go. I can do the same thing. mesh renderer, material, change that to, I guess, a green, things like that. And sort of the functions sort of control the different types of effects that you can achieve depending on the interactivity script that you're using. So I'll just, and if you want to ever remove anything, you can literally just highlight the different function that you're calling and hit that. And yeah, that's essentially how you control it. You also have like on enter local, on exit local, that controls like events you only want to happen on the local side of Flipside. So in a multiplayer session, it's only these sort of effects are only visible to you. Is that how I understand it? For the most part, I'm only ever really calling on enter or on exit. But yeah, that's essentially the collider element in a nutshell. But of course, there's other interactivities that you can accomplish inside of Flipside. And the one I want to talk about over in this area is prop elements. So essentially a prop element is, like the name implies, is anything in the in Flipside you can pick up, throw around. Maybe it's affected by gravity, maybe it isn't. But essentially it opens up a lot of functionality you can do with objects inside of your scenes. And the key thing with props is to know that to get them to work with physics, you need colliders on them of some kind. So I've already set these objects up with, well, I've set this object up with a box collider, which is really performant. But I don't have one on this object I want to turn into a prop. So I'm going to add a box collider, or maybe I'll add a sphere actually to kind of showcase different effects. Oh, sorry, I'm having some trouble with my heads-up display. I'll drop the radius on that, and the shape of the collider will determine how your object sort of moves in the scene, and it's sort of a really powerful way to change behavior of an object. And add a box collider to this object here too. And essentially, once you have colliders on your objects and they're relatively shaped to the proportions that you want, all you need to do is add a prop element script, like so. And also Flipside automatically adds a navmesh modifier object, which tells navmeshes to ignore these objects when you're building your navigation in your scene. That's like a whole different topic. But essentially, once I have this prop element here, and as you can see, it also has a gravity tab, this object is already a prop. If I simulate the scene, see the object is affected by gravity now. And because of the collider, I can pick it up, grab it, and throw it against walls and things like that. Of course, if you throw it hard enough, it'll punch right through the wall. So you gotta be careful. But while it's actually simulating inside of the scene, generally that doesn't happen. But yeah, that's essentially all that you really need to set up a prop in your scene. You can also change it, or here we go, change it so it's not affected by gravity, like so, by hitting that toggle there. I simulate again. This one will fall, this one will float. But if I enable gravity, boop, and there they are. As you can see, this one's got a sphere collider, so it'll roll around. Pretty cool. So anyway, I'm going to remove that sphere and add a box collider, like so. And yeah, that's essentially it as far as getting like a baseline prop, just an object that you want to pick up and interact with, like that. Oh, sorry about that. But there's also additional functionality that you can put onto your individual props. So as you can see, we have on begin interaction, on use button down, use button up, and on end interaction. And basically those are like the 4 states with a prop that you can manipulate. You can either have something happen when you pick up or drop the object, or you can have something happen when you hit the trigger on your controllers. It doesn't have to be like a specific button or anything like that. It's related to whatever controller system you're using. So like the triggers on your Steam VR controllers or the triggers on your Oculus, it's going to vary. But yeah. So for instance, if I wanted to, again, using a color change example, because that's a relatively simple effect that I can trigger, mesh renderer, material. So on this prop, when I pick it up, it'll change to bright green. And on end interaction, taking that same prop again, mesh renderer, material, and I'll have it change back to the purple, I think it was, or what's the material it's on now? Matte purple, yes. There it is, like so. Save the scene. We don't have a way to simulate prop interactions inside the object. We don't have like those dialogues there, but this effect will trigger once you bring your scene bundle into Flipside. Of course, we can also do something similar with on use button down, on use button up. That'll trigger for your controller. And yeah, that's basically everything to get started with props. You can also change how it behaves by adding multiple colliders. You can make a prop out of multiple sub-objects as long as the prop element script is at the top. So for instance, I could add another cube as a child to that prop. Prop example, big, for example. So take this cube, I'm going to 0 the transforms on it. So move it up, move it to the side like that. And essentially, if I simulate, then grab the prop. All right, there it is. I can change how it behaves in the environment. And yeah, pretty powerful stuff. Just going to delete that cube. Okay, so moving on from props, the other requested interaction that people were interested in was actually the toggle element, and toggle's really powerful. And I'm actually going to use it in conjunction with another really powerful tool, the button element, because you can use those two together to create some really powerful swapping effects between different states. So to get started on that, I actually have this toggle visual 1. I've got this sphere and this cube, and I've got these glasses, and these glasses actually have an animator on them that I'm going to trigger with a toggle state. So to get started on that, I'm going to find this button element here, and I'm going to add a button element script to it. As you can see, it's a little bit hard to visualize, but basically like a button element doesn't require a collider. You can actually manipulate it just with at the script level, and you control the press direction with these toggles here, depending on which axis you want the object to move. So for instance, I have the Y, and I want the button to push back when I press down on it, and maybe not that much. So like minus 0.06 degrees. So when I press on this button, it's going to cause an effect. And what I want it to do is to actually target a toggle script. So I'm going to add a toggle element script here. And the toggle element's really powerful. Basically, it works both similar to a collider element, but it also has these special initial on activated and on deactivated states. And that's basically how you can hot swap between two different states on things. Sorry, I'm kind of going over my words. So to sort of kick that off, essentially what I want is one of my states to have the sphere visible and the cube hidden. And I also want these glasses to swap between two states. So I'm going to add toggle visual because that's what has my animator. Oh, sorry, toggle visual 2 is the thing that I want. So button, toggle visual 2. There we go. And what I'm going to do is on the animator, I actually have a trigger set up for my visuals. I go to my animator, so I have these two different animation clips, and then I have a trigger that activates when it swaps to those different animations, as you can see here. So under my button, where is that? There's my button. Toggle visual, visual 2, animator, and I want to use the set trigger string, and its name is anim trigger, like so. And for the sphere and the cube, I want one to be active and one to be hidden at any given time. So I'm going to use the set active function, which is really powerful. So on its initial state, I'm actually going to hide the sphere. And for the cube, I want that to be visible. Set active, like so. And essentially, I'm just creating the opposite state now. So going to take toggle visual 2, set the animator, set trigger, string, give it the exact same name. Definitely want to check the spelling on that. And then for the sphere and the cube, we're just going to switch out which one is toggled on that given state. So object set active, object set active, and then sphere is the active one, and cube isn't. Okay, so essentially the toggle effect that we want to achieve is set up. But one important thing to keep in mind is I don't want it triggering for hands or anything. I specifically want it to trigger for this button. So what I'm going to do is actually give it a custom tag, and I think I've already named it prop here. So make sure it's using the same custom tag there. So now any object that has the prop tag and also is targeting this object, it will trigger for, and anything that doesn't meet that criteria is just ignored. So the last thing I want to do is actually get this swapping to happen while I'm pressing this button. And to do that, you have the option of triggering it on either the on button down or on button up. And basically that just determines at which point the effect triggers at when you're interacting with the button. And generally I like to use on button up, so you get like a little bit of a delay before the effect, but it's really up to you when you want those things to trigger. And all I need to do is actually target the toggle element script that I want to swap states on with this toggle state function right there. And essentially that's it as far as interaction. I can just simulate my scene like so. Okay, and essentially I'm running it, and all I want to do is fire button down, then fire button up. Okay, so something, NM trigger, NM trigger. Okay, so something's happened with my function there, unfortunately. Did I get the name wrong? NM capital G trigger. NM capital G trigger, NM capital G trigger. Okay, so that should be functioning. Not sure why that's happening. Maybe I need to save my scene, or something's going on with the animator. If I simulate, like so. Okay, so something's happened there. Sorry, didn't plan on troubleshooting this. Inspector, is this set to static? No. Okay, sorry folks. Normally that works. It was actually working in the, it should be working in the actual example scene. Just complete. Sorry, I've just hopped over to the final environment, like so. I'm gonna simulate that. Button like that, and no, it doesn't seem to be working. Okay, well that sucks. Well, I'm gonna have to move on from there, but generally speaking, the trigger element, in the example that I did before, the trigger element was working, but I'm gonna have to move on for now and come back to that at a later time. But in the meantime, assuming you've got your triggers working correctly, the next thing that we want to look at is camera controls inside of your environment, as well as screen element or canvas element, which is essentially a way for you to simulate screens, or maybe you want to play a video, or you want to have an environment camera switcher that you can actually see your camera outputs on. So to start things off, if you'll see over at this environment here, I've actually got two cameras that are set up, one above, one facing the subject matter here. And I've got these two objects that I can do interactions with for controls, and this little panel here. And what I want this panel to do, and it looks like I already have it set up here by mistake. Oh, this is the completed scene. Of course that would be there. Let me just add that back in and go back to my other scene. Okay, that's there too for some reason. Blah, that's unfortunate. All right, so as far as the screen element goes, what we're looking for is the screen element script, which we add to it, and we can control what screen type we want to target this object with. From the top, we have slideshow, main output, and of course the desktop. And generally speaking, you're only going to be working with either slideshow or main output. Oh, sorry, main output, there we go. And with that targeted, it's going to take the material on this object and swap it with a special one that's built inside of Flipside that your camera outputs to. So with that said, I can't simulate it inside of the Creator Tools, but I can simulate it inside of the actual Flipside itself. But if I want to control inside of my scene which camera I'm actually switching to, I can do that with a combination of two things. The first thing I need is a Flipside action script attached to an object that I could target. And Flipside Actions does a variety of things. You can control things that happen during the preload, on display events, like trigger timelines or animations when the scene's loading into your environment. And it's a pretty powerful script. But something else we can do is add a collider element to these spheres here. And I want them to trigger for hands. And on enter, I can actually call Flipside Actions and set it to a different camera. So set camera mode, change set, cut to camera. And basically Flipside works so it'll look at the number of cameras in your scene and look for a specific number, starting at 0 and then working its way through the list. So this button here, I want to switch to camera 0, whereas this one, which already has a collider element and Flipside Actions on it, I want that one to trigger for camera 2. Flipside Actions, cut to camera, set that to 1. And you can check in the example scene, but it'll actually swap between the different cameras 0 and cameras 1 as you hit those buttons, and then output to this screen element here, which is really powerful. It gives you the option of controlling what you see on camera. It's good for editing, for review. Actors can see themselves as you're recording things. And also, if you wanted to, you could hide visually when this output is visible by putting onto your UI layer. Sorry, I'm a little thirsty here. Excuse me. There we go. Okay, so basically, like when it's on the UI layer, it's hidden from cameras regularly unless specifically specified. So your actors can see events that are going on without it actually affecting your main output. Okay. And finally, I want to talk about the slideshow element, which is, if you're familiar with Flipside, you know on your account, you can actually post direct links to videos. The Flipside will actually load into your application. So you'll have to, I won't go to Flipside, or should I go to flipside.com? Essentially, you go to flipside.com, look for your account slideshow tab, and then fill in direct links to videos there. And whatever those links are will actually load for objects that have a slideshow element on them. So like the name implies, I'm going to remove it, add a screen element, set it to slideshow, and essentially that's all you really need. If you want buttons or any kind of tools to control which slide you're actually on inside of your environment, that's relatively easy to set up. Just like the other camera controls, you can add a Flipside action script to something like this object here. And then I'm actually going to turn this into a button like so. It's going to deform move on the x-axis, negative about that much. And on button down, I'm going to call Flipside actions, cut to camera, or where is that? Ah, here we go, previous slide. And essentially I can just take that, move it over. Where's my scripts? Here we go. So, sorry. Okay, so there's my script there. Just actions, I'll rename that next slide. Find my button, rename that next slide. So, and instead of calling Flipside actions previous, it's next slide there. So essentially between these two buttons, I can move back and forth depending on what slide I need to show. There we go. Yeah, so that basically concludes the 5 main areas of interaction that I wanted to talk about. Of course, that's not going to cover everything. Still a little bit mad that I wasn't able to get that trigger animation to trigger. That was working in our previous tests, so going to look into that after this. But I still encourage you to experiment with the creator tools, try and find ways to cause effects or to sort of manipulate your scenes the way you want to achieve the different results you want to see in your scenes. And overall, I think it's really powerful and awesome that we have this suite of tools available for people to create sets and experiences with.
Thanks, Thomas, for for that. I would like now's the opportunity to ask questions around interactivity. If people have questions, they have to go through the chat. So I'm gonna wait to see if either people have questions or we'll move on to characters next. So does anyone have any questions? And if you don't have a question, maybe you want to say no as well, so we can quickly find out who does or who doesn't, or if we want to move on to the next part. Is everyone feeling like we're good to move to the next part? That's the vibe I'm getting from the chat?
Yeah, it's no problem.
Okay, wait, yeah, sure. Nope, great job, Thomas. Excellent. Okay, cool. Everyone's looking to the next part. Okay, so the next part Thomas is going to do is introduce some of the components that relate to our avatars and our character. It's actually characters, not avatars. We differentiate between what an avatar is and a character is, and because this is a performance app, these are characters. So I'm going to pass this on to Thomas, and Thomas can speak to how to get the character set up.
Okay, 1 second. Let me just get my scene ready here. Avatar, and it's right here. I don't think I want to save that scene. Okay, so essentially I'm just going to go over how to take advantage, or I'm just going to start the video here, but sorry for the wait. Okay, so essentially this kind of assumes you're sort of familiar with the process of importing your character, and you've already gotten to the point where you have an FBX, you have blend shapes, or well, I could talk about blend shapes a little bit as well, but essentially you have a character that you're ready to bring into Flipside and you want them to be animated in some capacity. Sorry, getting my breath here. But okay, so starting from the top, basically Flipside has this main script that whenever you create your character, so like say you have an FBX that you've imported into your Creator Tools, create character from selected model, or if you have your Flipside creator panel open, you can, the dialogue here changes depending on the context, but if I didn't already have a Unity scene created, this is where it'd say like, oh, import your character. And Flipside's cool in that once it has an FBX, for the most part, it can automatically set up a lot. But one thing that it still is something you'll definitely want to look at hooking up yourself is how the character's face animates. So essentially, there's a couple different ways that Flipside achieves facial animation, and the main one I'm going to be focusing on is its blend shape toolset. So if you're familiar with blend shapes, basically they're a special type of way to embed vertex information into a 3D model of some kinds that you can manipulate during runtime. And what it does is it deforms the model in a specific way so that you can fake different facial expressions or effects depending on the context of the character. Maybe you want it to grow fangs, maybe you want its eyes to pop out like crazy. It's really going to depend. But as far as hooking up a character for Flipside goes, the main thing, sorry, I'm saying a lot. The main thing you need to do is make sure that you're targeting a skinned mesh that has blend shapes on it when you're using the blend shape mode. And this also applies to simplified blend shapes, which I'll touch on a little bit. And it's my character's head that actually has my blend shapes. And if you're ever unsure what part of your character in your scene has blend shapes or not, you can check your import settings to make sure they're being imported. Oh, excuse me. And then you can actually like comb through your different skin mesh objects. And if you have blend shapes on them, it'll actually show up as a dropdown. It's kind of small unless you actually drop down the menu there. And then you can actually just scroll back and forth and check to see which blend shapes are being loaded on the character. And so that'll vary depending on the software you get that character from. But it's a really powerful way to control sort of how your character spots, how your character speaks, how your character emotes, and then any number sort of ways to bring your character to life. But with Flipside, what makes Flipside really cool is that you can actually control which blend shapes are being triggered depending on context. So if you've used the app, you know you can control your emotions with your left thumbstick, and you can actually switch between blend shapes, or what's actually happening when you're doing that is the controls are changing which blend shape is active at any given time. So for instance, my happy expression, my sad expression, like so, and surprised, as well as angry. Sorry, I'm going a little bit fast here. But with this particular character, I already have those main blend shapes set up in a way where I only need one blend shape per emotion. You're not actually locked to that though. The cool thing about Flipside is you can control both the threshold of like how far any one emotion can be pushed, but you can also add any number of blend shapes on your character to create a composite expression. So for example, if I wanted the happy to have maybe a little bit more impact to it, maybe I'll blend it with this ooh blend shape, like so. So when I decide my character's happy with my controls, the face will go, ah, like that. And if I ever want to remove a blend shape, I can also just hit delete there. Also, I think while it's previewing, if I delete the blend shape, it'll still leave the blend shape up. So in that case, sometimes it's a good idea just to check your blend shape list and make sure it's zeroed out after you've combed through all your blend shapes, just in case something gets left turned on. But essentially, that's all you need to get started with your emotions. Then, of course, you have your blinks. You don't necessarily need blink left and blink right. Those are leftover, but you definitely need your blink all, which will trigger for your full character. Or if you have those two just separated, you can actually add both a blink left and a blink right effect, like so. And essentially that achieves the same thing. Then of course you have your different Visemes, which is like the shapes your mouth makes depending on the noise. Flipside will actually listen to the audio coming into your microphone and change which blend shape it's using depending on the context. So as far as like lip sync goes, it's very dependent on how well crafted your facial Visemes are. So to start things off, this is a character that we actually made for Flipside. So when I make the ah sound effect, I have an actual sculpted blend shape for the ah shape. And basically I'm just working through the list of all the different blend shapes until I fill that out. So sorry, gotta hide my gizmos, they're a little bit in the way there. Like so. Add my O. Actually, I think I go with an ooh. We have both of those. Fa. La. And there we go. And essentially, that's all you really need to get started with your blend shapes. But you're not just limited to that. There's also, if you wanted something similar to like a Muppet character, what you could take advantage of is the simplified blend shape approach, which basically takes all the mouth shape Visemes and boils it down to just one open mouth shape. And depending on the audio that's coming in, you'll basically just flap open and closed, like so. Let's check chat here. Sorry. Yeah, but essentially that's as far as you need to get started with blend shapes on your character, and pretty powerful stuff. Something else I do want to touch on though with another avatar quickly is this concept of the difference between the avatar model reference script, which is like your baseline facial expressions, and the facial model reference scripts, which actually lets you control multiple meshes. Sorry, a little bit dry again. So let me see here. I believe it was example ref, and this was originally a Mixamo character. We're not going to be sharing this because this is theirs, but essentially what I wanted to showcase on this character is not only do they have a full retinue of blend shapes that I've crafted, but I'm also taking advantage of the facial expression reference script, which like other scripts in Flipside, you search it up, facial expression reference, like so. And what's cool about this tool is I can target either meshes, which refers to skin meshes, or in this case, I actually just have a flat texture. And I'll just add this momentarily to that. And as you can see, it's this little dongle up here over the face. And what I'm doing is I'm actually adding just a simple cutout material that I can swap the texture on to create this effect, like so. So when my character is angry, like that, has a visual cue that's added on top of it, some extra stylization. And the cool thing is I have it set up so I'm using the combo textures effect for this. And essentially combo textures is what we use for textured characters that we want to emote. And essentially I have a semi-transparent image that's transparent enough that the cutout material will just not render at a certain transparency. And then on the angry emotion, it'll actually swap to this specific texture there, the angry sort of nerve effect. So for the most part, you're never going to see that material until your character becomes angry, in which case the texture is there. And I'm not limited to just texture effects either when using combo textures. If I have like an additional skin mesh renderer that has blend shapes, like maybe the eyebrows on this character are a whole separate object that I still want to control, I can actually just change the blend shape mode and add those specific blend shapes to that body part. So like in the eyebrow example, if they have an angry expression for just those eyebrows, I can target those with the facial expression reference script, whereas the rest of the body has like the full list of blend shapes for like mouth, expressions, blinking, everything else. And yeah, between those two scripts is generally how we control all of the emotions on characters. There's also like the animation system, which we'll probably touch on in another video, but the majority of characters we recommend using blend shapes with. And yeah, that's essentially it. Okay.
Thanks, Thomas.
Does that include everything? Any questions, comments that I might have missed?
There are some questions, and one of the questions is, so Ari Tar asked about, is there the specific question was, there a way to like swap the head and then have more facial expressions? He's hoping for, like, we have 4: happy, angry, surprised, and happy, angry, surprised, and scared, or I think, or fear, or something like that. We have 4. But he's wondering, well, what happens if a character wants to have more than 4? Are there workarounds? Are there approaches? That's the question.
It's kind of tough. I mean, part of the reason for that is like the limited amount of controls that we have on our characters. Like it's designed so actors on the fly can swap between emotions. And I believe that this was something you and the team tested before I came on, where like the happy number that you've settled on was 4 emotions. But really you're not limited to specifically using those blend shapes for those emotions. You can actually have multiple versions of an avatar that just has like different emotions hooked up to those 4 different points. So maybe you have like a version 2, and yes, it's a little bit difficult to keep track of it, but you can plug in like horror into the happy input, and you can plug any shapes into any sort of input, and maybe you'll have like 4 or 5 versions of the same character that you have organized for those specific expressions you can swap into depending on your shots. But at the moment, we don't have like a super
that's a good workaround.
Yeah, it's a solid workaround, and maybe that's something we can work with the community on to improve on as we add more functionality. But at the moment, you're kind of locked to those 4 main emotions unless you do workarounds, or you end up bringing your animations into another piece of software like maybe Blender, or circle it back into Unity as like an animation that you then manually control the blend shapes with. It's a pretty robust area of expertise.
Thanks, Thomas.
I might add a little something on that. First, Jordan's emotion bank is a good suggestion. I think that's something we should consider. The initial, like the current version, basically because we're mapping it to your joystick or thumb pad, we're kind of limited in our directions, and getting into that, like the difference between a diagonal don't really work. So we're kind of like 4 kind of just made the most sense in testing. But the nice thing is at least the expressiveness when we come to full face tracking will be that it'll just map sort of more directly, and it won't be just like happy or sad. It'll be moving your jaw up and moving your eyebrows and adjusting the individual pieces of it. So that'll give us a lot more flexibility there, but we're still, in terms of thinking about those like cartoony effects and the additive things that you can have, that's something I think we need to continue to think on how we're going to incorporate that when we do get face tracking and that kind of stuff. And because that's something we don't want to lose, and we really love what we've been able to do with that in a few different characters.
No, it's awesome.
Awesome. So just checking to see if there are any other questions.
There was also Ari's question about how many blend shapes and whether you can have more.
Right. True enough.
I could also probably speak to that because I'm working on our face tracking a bit behind the scenes. Right now there's 15, I think, 15 or 17, or it's in the teens. And once we implement face tracking, there's going to be a set of 52, I think it is. And then there might end up being 2 or 3 different varieties that end up mapping to a few more expressions using the lip sync technique, or others that map to the face tracking technique. And we're building a system that'll kind of map from one to the other as well. So if you have face tracking, but you set up a character using the older system, it'll still like it'll translate in the moment from one to the other. Or vice versa. So it's kind of going to be a mix and match, but there might be a little bit of fidelity loss between them. But that's kind of where we're going with it, is they'll end up being quite a bit more expressiveness in the next iteration.
Yeah, to touch on that too, like part of the reason it's set up this way as well is there's like a larger barrier of entry when it comes to demanding what people are bringing into Flipside. Like the way it's set up now is this really nice medium ground where people who might not have a lot of experience setting things, these sort of things up, will still be able to manage it, versus like somebody who doesn't know that much coming into Flipside is going to have a much bigger or a much harder time setting up 52 individual blend shapes to get the effects that they want. So it's definitely going to be a case by case thing.
Also, on the topic of facial expressions, we showed you blend shapes. And there's an opportunity down the road to show you how we do our sprite-based facial expressions as well, which looks very much it's taken from the 2D cartoon world of the way lip syncs work too. So there's a number of options on the facial expressions and lip syncing. Are there any other questions right now? And you know, the goal for us is to find out if doing more of these things would be helpful. I do think that there's so much more to teach about our creator tools, and we're just starting our process. You know, so I don't want to end it early today. So I want to give people an opportunity to reflect if they've got any more questions. Okay, it feels like, you know, it's a good place for us to you know, end the formal part. What other topics do you want us to cover is a question that Rachel just asked. We still have 10 more minutes for this webinar, so that might be good for us to figure out right now. Is there anything particular or any projects that you're working on that you have specific questions that can help us start directing our Creator Tools tutorials? I have a feature request for Zoom to show that when people are typing, to show that so you can tell if people are typing or not. Building control panels with a series of buttons would be good to cover.
Ah, yes, that would be really cool. There's a bit of a workaround with that, but it's not as complicated as you might think.
So basically, in your experience, you might want to have controls that do things like trigger animations or make something pop up or open the door, or who knows what you're doing behind the scenes with that control panel. Laugh tracks. Well, that's another way to actually, you can trigger audio. So audio clips and laugh tracks, and creating your own audio board is something that you could do with that type of thing. So we're still in the size, well, I think while we're still in this size of audience for events, like having an on-camera brainstorm and such. Okay, so basically you're saying, hey, maybe there's an opportunity to, we're a smaller community that we're figuring it out. There's an opportunity to do like a camera brainstorm with a number of people. That's the suggestion from Jordan.
Oh,
Is that
sorry, I missed some of these questions. Ari actually sent me earlier. 248, or is everybody else seeing these from Ari? Or there are 3 open questions at the moment.
Oh, let me take a look. Is there an easy way to make a prop removable so it is added to a is there an easy way to make a prop removable so it is added to a recording? Can you do you understand that? Are you getting that context, or do you need a little more information, Thomas?
I think I kind of get what they're talking about. Like maybe they want a prop, like basically adding a prop to the control panel so that you can like add them in on a scene by scene basis, like we have with the regular props. Because of course, at the moment we have props built into your environment, and then you also have props in the actual control panel, I believe it's called, or the panel that you can pull props from, basically. And yeah,
Well,
I think did you want you could probably talk a little bit about that, Lux.
Yeah, I could. So props are kind of undergoing a bit of a transformation internally right now. And currently we have, you can upload props as OBJ files, which is kind of like lightweight. It's sort of a mediocre 3D format. It doesn't give you a lot of the flexibility that bringing something in from Unity does, where you can attach events like we were showing. So you can't make like an interactive prop, but you can import and it'll, you know, you can still grab it and put it onto sets and stuff. But realizing that's too limited, what we're doing is we're building another feature in the creator tools that are going to be prop kits. So you'll be able to build a series of props into one kit, test them all out, and it'll be like, here's my gun pack, or here's my camera tools pack, or like different kind of anything really. And those props will import sort of they're going to end up being our replacement for the OBJs. So we're going to sort of retire that, and that will let people bring props into our prop menu and then bring them into any set you want and manage them just like our bundled props are right now. But you'll also have the added bonus that all of those props can have basically unlimited effects, particles. You know, you could make a flashlight that you import. And so it's going to be a lot more flexible, and that's coming probably fall. I'm going to say we're working out some of the kinks of it right now, and then that'll be coming along with our new user interface towards end of summer, like early fall.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just on that as well, and I'll get to the next questions, but one of the fun things that you could do with prop kits, for example, is, and if you're using the desktop version of the app, you could create like a weather prop kit, and one, so you could pick up a prop and trigger it and it rains. Or you might decide that you want to create a set of improv tools that you want to like do a live improv show, and you want to use those props as objects that you bring into the experience, and you can modify things. And so there's a lot of ways to think about prop kits, how they could be used. Can I do that already? Can I do that already? Yeah, you can do. The only thing you would be immensely so
turning the desktop mirror so it's hidden from the audience, putting it on the UI layer.
Yeah, so
I think that's something we should talk about. That could be an easy win.
Because right now what's happening is I think we're pulling it off the tools palette and it still shows up in the UI layer. So that's something to think about too. Yeah.
Okay.
Or it shows up in the cameras.
And the camera, yeah. Here, I want to go to the other questions here. Is it possible to change physics? Well, right now, physics is hard-coded into the app based on our, like, you can turn gravity on or off, but you can't change, for example, the meters per second that gravity follows yet, because that's a universal setting that we haven't exposed to the entire
sorry to interrupt. I can't touch on that though. There are ways to manipulate the weight and the mass of objects inside of your scene, and actually I think I might do a quick screen share of that. Nobody minds?
Do it.
Cool. Sharing my screen. Okay, so coming over here. So this is related to props, but essentially when you add a prop script to anything in Flipside, it automatically adds the other thing that it needs besides a collider, which is a rigid body. And a rigid body, just like, it's a specific type of script that lets Unity know that this object has physics. And you can see it here. It has these specific settings. down here. So you've got like a mass, drag, things like that. It's gravity, whether or not it's kinematic, which you can read Unity's documentation on that for the most part. But a key thing you can do with props is if you want to manipulate those settings, like say it's a bowling ball or something like that, you can actually add a Rigidbody script ahead of time and manipulate your settings there. So for instance, maybe I increase the mass to something crazy like 9. And then when I simulate, this object should have more mass to it. See, it almost like punches through there. And it's kind of hard to articulate until you're in VR, but notice how like it doesn't want to move around. It seems to be a little bit heavier. And that's one of the main ways you can manipulate physics. You can also change like the interpolation mode or the collision detection. I don't recommend messing with these settings just because that's going to change how much of a memory footprint the physics has on your environment. You can potentially crash it that way, but the options are there. And yeah, but most of the time for most props, I don't bother adding a rigid body just because that's an additional step. I could save time just by doing this or that. But for use cases where I need heavier objects or even lighter objects, I add the rigid body and manipulate the physics that way.
Awesome. I'm going to continue on. There's a few more questions here. Okay, one thing to, we're going to go back to that prop question. Basically, there was what Ari was talking about is to clarify, can a prop be added to an avatar so that it shows up in an avatar recording? Can that prop then be made removable? Basically, you've recorded an avatar with a prop. Can you remove the prop from the recording?
Oh. That I don't know.
Removable from the recording or made like removable from the character? I wonder, that would be, so right now I think there's an issue with our when you take all the colliders for the body physics, I don't think our current version is distinguishing between colliders for that and colliders for props, and that's a bug we need to fix. So we need to essentially distinguish between those two so that you can still have physics on, you know, with like, so your hands don't go through your arms and stuff, but you could still grab a gun from your holster and then use it. And that's, so that'll be, when we fix that, that'll bring props on avatars back into it. And then they ought to be recordable. They should play back in the recording and do all that. There's some interesting challenges of if a prop, if you grab it off of your character and then you were to throw it, it's still parented to you. So then it would fly, but it cannot, it like change direction on you. So we need to sort out a few details of how it might kind of come unlinked from you and then how it might come back to you and do all that. But we have, those are sort of the little nuanced things we're exploring, but that's something that we have in our bug list to get to at some point.
Last question, folks. The question is, what are we doing with locomotion? So one thing that Ari Tar want to know about is joystick locomotion coming into play, and are we expanding the puppet tool?
I can may as well keep talking roadmap here. Our UI right now is kind of in the process of being redone, as we mentioned, for like late summer, early fall. That is also going to be coupled with our with a new locomotion system, and essentially it's going to sort of build on, replace the current puppet tool, but you're going to jump into that third-person view, have joystick controls for your lower half, and we're going to blend that with full body motion capture on the upper half, so you'll still be able to move both arms instead of them being tied to one hand like the current puppet is. So that'll expand the capability of what it can do, while also introducing like walk or run locomotion features as well. So that's partly being tied to that because the UI transition is allowing for some of the things we need for that. So that's coming this year, but a little bit later, kind of end of summer, probably September timeframe.
Okay. We are coming to our hour, and those were great questions. And our intention here is to grow this community and to add, have more people getting excited about our creator tools. So we'll come back to the community and let them know when the next one's happening, and that'll be part of our ongoing process of introducing more of these. We will post this recording, and here I'll put myself into spotlight view right now, just so that so we will be continuing this process. So thank you very much. If you have any follow-up questions, reach out to us on Discord. That's the best place to connect with us, where we can then assign the right people in our team to solve the right problems. It could be, you could be working with Lux or Thomas or even Tony, but just want you to know Discord's the place to be for that. If you run into any really big technical problems, there's two things that you can do. Many of you do it already. One of them is going into our app and sending a support issue when you find a bug or a challenge. And if you're using the desktop version of the app has a support tab that's available on the second screen that you can type in a message, and then we receive that directly into our own internal process. Or you can email us at support@flipsidexr.com. I'll put that in the chat. We also have a community site, flipsidecommunity.com, which has also a forum as well. So there were a number of places you can either directly connect to us, meet us on the Discord, or meet us on our community forum as well. So we are complete today. This is our first one. Thank you for joining us. And we will post the recording when it's done. So thanks very much. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Lux and Rachel and Tony for being here. And we will see you next time.
All right.